Here we go. Hey there, folks. Since book tour and conventions have been put on hold for a bit, I figured I'd bring book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. With us tonight is the New York Times best-selling science fiction author, John Jackson Miller. His Star Trek novels include Discovery, Die Standing, Discovery, The Enterprise War, The Prey Trilogy, and Takedown. His Star Wars novels include A New Dawn, Kenobi, Knight Errant, Lost Tribe, and the Sith, and the Knights of the Old Republic comics. He has also written comics and prose for Halo, Iron Man, Simpsons, Conan, Planet of the Apes, and Mass Effect, with recent graphic novels for Battlestar Galactica, one of my favorites, Dumbo, and The Lion King. Welcome, John.
Hey, glad to be here.
All right, good to see you. All right, just a quick heads up to the folks at home. Feel free to send me notes or questions you have for John in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, John. So as always, we're going to start at the beginning. So where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Memphis, grew up about 3 blocks from Graceland. When I got to see Star Wars, it was in the same theater where Elvis saw it, because he would actually close it down. It was the theater right next to Graceland. He would close it down at night and have private screenings. And it's probably the last movie he saw, because obviously that was 1977, and he passes away in July, or rather in August. So that was kind of an interesting place to grow up.
So hold on. So I've always wanted to go. I've never been to Memphis. So growing up there, so did you live in Memphis your whole life, or just in your early years? Or
I was there basically through graduating high school, and my family still lived back there, and I still have family back there. So I go back every year now to Mid-South Con, which is the convention that I used to go to as a teenager, and is still being held.
So were you an Elvis fan?
Elvis may have actually helped put me through private school, because my dad did car stereo work for Madison Cadillac, and Elvis was buying a Cadillac there a week, and so my dad was installing quadraphonic stereo systems with 8-track tape decks and everything. But apparently he never liked Elvis. He never wanted to go work at Graceland. He did get a couple of offers to go over and fix televisions there, and he wouldn't do it, because apparently Elvis had gotten into a fight with some of the Marines on my dad's naval base up there in Millington back in the 1950s. Elvis and his guys. And
whoa, hang on. Don't go past that. Go back.
Yeah.
So
your dad he held a grudge.
wait. So your dad was in the Army.
That's in the Marines.
On the Marines. So your dad was a Marine.
Yeah.
Okay, and so so your dad was in the Philippines when Elvis was there?
The Millington Naval Air Station was north of Memphis, and basically they would all go downtown Memphis, and they would all run into these people. So my father ran into Elvis several times there. Also, Johnny Cash apparently was there once. My dad was a very simple, salt of the earth guy. He was not impressed by celebrity at all. People kept dying in the newspaper, and I'd read the name, and my father would say, "Oh, Buck Owens from Hee Haw. Yeah, he used to eat at that little lunch counter over there near the recording studio." And I'm like, "Dad, why didn't you tell me this?"
Wait, so Elvis was sort of tangentially accessible. So how did he? What was this fight that he got into? Tell me about.
No. He basically they I guess from what I understand from my dad, apparently Elvis and the Memphis Mafia, as they called it, he and his boys, they went honky tonking someday in the 1950s. And apparently they ended up getting into a brawl with some Marines. My dad wasn't one of them. But every time they went back downtown, they more or less, if they had run into him again, we might not have had a king of rock and roll. So, at any rate, my dad kept declining the offers that Red West, who of course he was one of Elvis's guys, but also he ended up being he's one of the cast members of Baba Black Sheep. Red apparently had offered my dad, come in, fix TV sets at Graceland, And my dad was just never interested. And it's just as well because I cannot visualize the surreality of my dad with his toolkit, in the jungle room tending to a zenith that's got a gunshot wound. Well, nobody who lived there knew how weird Graceland was inside until after he passed. It was just kind of a weird thing. But anyway, yeah, that is where I grew up, and I've spent the last 25 years I've been in Wisconsin, where I came up here to work for Comics Buyer's Guide.
Well, hang, you're jumping
way
the queue
ahead.
here. You're jumping the queue. Hang on. So let's slow down a little bit. So you grew up in Memphis. Was it just you? Did you have brothers, sisters?
I had an older sister, and she was I still do have an older sister. She was sort of my entree to just about everything pop culture. She had the Monty Python records and the George Carlin records, and she was the one who got me in to see Star Wars after multiple times of trying to get in and not getting in, because that was back in the days before multiplexes. And so when I wrote the novel Kenobi a few years ago, I dedicated it to my sister for making sure her kid brother got in to see the movie.
Wow. So your sister was, so obviously your sister sounds like was kind of like a big influence on you, helped you sort of encourage that side of you. Were your parents sort of in favor of that too? Or
yeah, my mother was a grade school librarian, and where other people's mothers threw their comics away, my mother encouraged me to keep mine in order. So I continued to keep everything that I ever bought and have it organized. And I still today have all my comics in a filing system that was started and alphabetized and organized. It's the same way. It's an iteration of what I had just in a drawer of the bureau 40 odd years ago. And the only difference is now it's in a separate building because I need that much to hold it all.
All right, got the long white boxes. So
no, everything is stored bookcase style, bags and boards.
Yep.
And when I bought the place, I had to actually have somebody come out and look at. I had to have an engineer look at the floor to make sure that the floor wouldn't collapse in on my cars.
Right.
Because comics are heavy.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So what was your first introduction to sci-fi and fantasy? Was it Star Wars, or did it start before then?
I'm sure that I was, seeing Star Trek on, I was seeing Star Trek reruns on TV at that point. I actually was born the night that the TV episode, A Piece of the Action, the basically the not Mission Impossible, sorry, different Desilu show. It was a different Paramount show. The Untouchables episode of Star Trek, the one where they go to the 1930s planet. That debuted the night I was born. So
It was fate.
Could not catch that in first run. I was a little busy, but yeah, I mean, I was watching that. I was certainly big into the space program at the time, and I started drawing my own comics at the same time I started collecting them. So age 6, I had a character called Space Tracer, and I had absolutely no talent for art. But later on, as I went through school, I ended up becoming part of sort of this movement of the small press in comics, where we would be mailing mini comics back and forth to each other that we would photocopy. And again, that's something else my dad helped me with, because he had a photocopier. Oh yeah. It was a way to participate in the hobby back then. Today you'd have a webcomic. But back then that was what it had to be. I started doing my own fanzines and that sort of thing. Circulation 10. It just wasn't a huge number.
So back then, so was it just sort of you kind of doing, were you kind of in your own little like geek bubble, or did you have like a community of friends? Like,
I had a community, and what would happen is it would turn over pretty frequently. So there was a friend of mine with whom I had sort of around the time that Empire Strikes Back came out, age 12, the golden age is 12. We had a big 1,000-page series of notebooks where we had designed this space this space world, and so we had all of our documents, all of our designs and everything for it. But what would happen is you'd have these periods of peak fandom in school, and then everybody would all suddenly drop out because they discovered girls, or they discovered alcohol, or they discovered something else, and that actually happened in between my middle school and high school years. At the same time, though, I think that was a major factor in me ending up having a career in this, because what happened, two things: everybody gave their comics to me, everybody gave their gaming stuff to me. I ended up absorbing all these other collections, and I also, in those periods, turned outside. I subscribed to Comics Buyer's Guide, which we mentioned. I started doing the small press work, which we mentioned.
Right. Okay, well, hang on.
I started going to conventions.
Right. Hang on. You're giving me so much stuff. I want to get into some of the stuff. So you were reading comics by the time you were 8, 10, 12 years old. What were the comics like? What were your go-to titles? What did you like the most?
I think before Star Wars came out, I was a big fan of the Disney comics by Carl Barks. There were other good creators at Gold Key Comics at the time. Warren Tufts, he was doing a very crazy run in the Pink Panther series. But the first grown-up comic book I got was Star Wars #1, which of course comes out and ends up selling 1 million copies and helps save Marvel. At the time, I was just a kid. I didn't know that was what was the subtext. But I am sort of I would take to these things obsessively around about when high school started. I was recording every comic book, where I bought it, what day it was, what location I got it from, and I think that has continued again with me over the years. I no longer keep that sort of accession list for the library, if you want to call it that, but certainly the roots of what I'm doing over on my comics history site Comicron come from that.
So you had this giant collection of comics. What were your, so you mentioned a few, but what were the titles that really kind of had the greatest impact on you?
I would say, when I get into that sort of period where I'm not going to give it up again, because we would all lapse as readers for a few months and get more interested in other things. Once I started obsessively just getting every month, I was a big fan of Amazing Spider-Man, the run that Roger Stern did, leading into Tom DeFalco. I was a huge fan of Jim Starlin, the creator of Thanos, when he did a series called Dreadstar. That was another science fiction series. I certainly was, like everybody else, obsessed with the X-Men in those years. I was really more of a Marvel zombie, which was a pejorative term that came around at that time that meant that you bought everything that Marvel put out. Of course, nobody can do that any longer. I will say, however, in my later life, having married a comics retailer, I could say that part of her dowry was bringing all the DC comics to the marriage that I didn't have.
Wait, hang on. Hold on. Wait. So tell me about that. Wait, go back. So your wife was working where?
Yeah, my wife was the manager of Xanadu Comics in Seattle in the early 90s. And again,
I've been there.
Yeah, down on 3rd Street. And again, I'd gotten this job, in the early 1990s, where I was editing the trade magazine for the comics industry for the publishers of Comics Buyer's Guide. It was called Comics Retailer. And so, she and I actually met over the phone. She was sending sales reports to me. And then we actually physically met at San Diego Comic-Con in '94. The very first panel I ever hosted, she asked the very first question. So that was kind of cool.
There you go.
And I was just so happy to be able to stop talking at that point because that
So
was one of those panels that had 10 panelists on it, and I
well,
was
you realize, of course, that you just described almost every like nerd's dream is that they married their comic book girlfriend.
yeah.
That just doesn't happen.
Well, it worked out, and so it certainly never became a situation where I had to do away with the comics anyway. So.
Good for you. All right, so look, so you started, so you did some essentially some fanzines, some micro comics back, when you were younger. So when did you really start getting serious about writing?
Well, I became a journalist, having done all of my fanzines. They tapped me to be the editor of the high school newspaper. When I went to the University of Tennessee, I ended up becoming the editor of the college newspaper there. I did take a left turn into, I got a graduate degree, probably the last master's degree in Soviet studies that was offered in this country before the Soviet Union collapsed. And it collapsed on my dissertation, and that's the reason why I didn't get a doctorate.
Do you speak Russian?
Я немного говорю. I very little at this point, but what ended up happening is, I went back to journalism. I edited a line of lumber magazines for a year. Got hired, thankfully, by the comics folks, and over that period of time, I just I honed my writing, and began meeting other writers. And realized I might be able to do this thing. One of the things that happened is that Harlan Ellison, who was a friend of Maggie Thompson, Maggie ran Comics Buyer's Guide. Harlan would read Comics Buyer's Guide, and every so often he would call the office and have us all get on speakerphone so he could tell us the latest joke that he had heard from Robin Williams or something like that. But he called me one day and said, hey, Miller kid. He would call me the Miller kid. Miller, he said, this article you just wrote, this column you just wrote, it's wonderfully written. It's extremely well written. Only 1% of 1,000% of the American people would be able to use this phrase this way that you did. And you really need to give up this whole journalism thing and start writing novels and short stories. And I was like flabbergasted and
wow. So Harlan Ellison.
Yeah, he did. He
called you.
And
he told you to quit your job and start writing.
Well, he said I should start writing. He didn't tell me to quit my job, but he said that's where the future was. Now the funny sequel to this is that I was the next year I decided, well, I'll write a short story. So I wrote a short story, and Maggie, actually, it reached Harlan by Maggie giving a copy of it to Mark Evanier, who gave a copy of it to Harlan when he was out there, because Harlan had agreed to actually read it and proofread it. And Harlan had not proofread anything in a long time, I don't think. But, it sat out there for a while. And then one day, while my wife was 9 months pregnant, so we were expecting my son, he calls me at the office. He says, Miller, I'm about to get started reading your story. I'll call you back. And I tried to do some work, sat by the phone, and he called me back in an hour, and he says, okay, kid, I'm at the end of page 1. And then he went down the list of what I had done right. I love this word, this expression. And this, you should never say this. Your characters are posturing. Don't do that. Something's come up. I'll call you back. And then we would do page 2 an hour later. And I think we got like 4 pages in, and we got into the part where there was an email virus or something, and an email virus in the plot of the story. And he said, all right, kid, I don't do email, so I don't know what you're talking about here. So I just keep at it. And by this point, I was pretty much hiding under my desk because I was, and in fact, I didn't write anything else for about a year after that.
Oh, he scared you straight. Oh no.
Well, it was, but no, I mean, I really did appreciate, I know everybody's mileage varied with Harlan, but I always had, good interactions with him. And,
wow.
It was the case that, I did start writing professionally fiction. It started with comics, and that came about Just a couple of years after that, 2003, Marvel was looking for people to, looking for outsiders to do things with characters they hadn't used in a while. And I drew on that whole Russian thing to do a comic book series called Crimson Dynamo, which was based on the Iron Man villain from the Russian version of Iron Man. That led to me getting Iron Man for a year, and I wrote that. And during that year, I was kind of cool because I made Tony Stark the Secretary of Defense, and we put out some of the plot elements that they used in the movies, and some of the characters actually ended up turning up in the movies. Cool. From that arc. So that was really kind of cool. One of them ended up being one of the villains in Ant-Man and the Wasp. And so they actually flew me and my wife and also our artist from Argentina out to the premiere. So that was very
cool. That is cool as hell.
That was a couple of years ago. And yeah, and considering it was a comic book that came out in 2003, 2004, I mean that's kind of going back. So, but anyway, that led to me getting a chance to write Star Wars. And once I wrote the Star Wars comics, the Star Wars novels, the games, and then, Star Trek, fiction, everything else kind of followed that.
So, all right. So you've made a career in a large way writing about Star Wars and Star Trek. So let me ask you, what's similar about these franchises and what makes them unique?
Yeah. I think the thing that is similar is that they're both very well manicured gardens, in the sense that you can find answers to just about every question that you might have in terms of how this world works. There's a lot of stuff to invoke in terms of doing your research. So that's how they're similar approaching it as a writer. Obviously, there's similarities and differences in terms of enjoying it as a viewer. I mean, obviously, Star Wars is conflict is in the name. Star Trek, the journey is in the name. I tend to probably be a more conflict-heavy writer when it comes to my Star Trek stuff, just because I both I did Star Wars first, but I also did comics first. So I do a whole lot of action pieces. I do a whole lot of set pieces, with the characters. The major difference if you're writing Star Wars and Star Trek, Star Wars obviously is space fantasy. It's space opera. There's science there, but it can never be the point of the story. It can never be the hinge on which a major plot point turns. Star Trek, absolutely. I mean, the very first story I wrote for Star Trek was an ebook that took the episode of Next Generation called the Next Phase, where Geordi and Ro Laren got stuck in between dimensions, and so they're sort of walking through walls and things like that. And I was able to use the story to address some of the burning questions, like why they didn't fall out of the back of the spaceship whenever it moved, and why was that phased Romulan able to actually sit down in a chair at one point. Obviously I wrote a story around it, but I was able to hit those moments in there. And cool. Talk about it. You wouldn't want to do that with Star Wars. In Star Wars, you got sound in space, and we're not even going to discuss why. I mean, it's just there. So.
Right. Fair enough, right? It's just escapism. So let me ask you. So Star Trek, actually now, Star Trek really, obviously it's got it started off in TV, and then it branched out into the movies, and it's come back to TV, back and forth, and Star Trek has had another resurgence last several years. And Star Wars, even with the Clone Wars and now even with the Mandalorian, is branching out on the TV side too. So let me ask you, what makes both of these franchises so enduring?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, obviously, in Star Wars, it begins with the individual. We saw in Luke Skywalker this random kid, out in the middle of nowhere, who discovers that he's the most important person in the galaxy, and he never even knew it. Well, you can tell stories like that with just about any person in any point of view. Not exactly that story, but I mean, it's Star Wars. It's a world that it's very easy to find viewpoints that you haven't seen before and follow them. And the idea with Star Wars anyway was this is a science fiction universe where everything looks old. It looks used. It looks lived in. That was kind of the feeling when you first saw the original movie. Everything's got a history to it, so you can kind of tell stories like that. And indeed, I've written in multiple different parts of the Star Wars timeline. I've actually written less in the actual movie frame than the others. So there's a lot of room to move there, and a lot of different stories to tell, a lot of different perspectives to speak from. Star Trek. What's interesting about it is it does sort of have that. Starfleet is a centerpiece to it, and exploration is a centerpiece to it. But they have developed so many things along the way that you can, spend quite a good length of time writing novels, just exploring a certain part of it. I mean, the Prey trilogy, it's basically my love letter to all the Klingon episodes that we saw during the Next Generation, where they kind of really, branched out and showed us more of that world and what it was like, for those people. Same with the novel I just did, Star Trek Discovery Die Standing with the Mirror Universe. This is about Emperor Giorgio.
Yeah.
And,
well, let's
but I guess the point of it is, once again, we have these various perspectives that are coming into Star Trek and looking at it from a different point of view.
All right.
To use an expression.
All right. So a quick interlude for folks who came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments for John, send them in the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of the show. Okay. So you just started to mention it. We're going to do it now. We'll do a little shared screen. You got some new books coming out. Let's see what you got. Let's share with the folks what we got here. So what do we got?
Well, the book I just mentioned, which is Star Trek Discovery Die Standing, is it takes place between the first and second seasons of Discovery, and it is the first mission that Emperor Giorgio goes on for Section 31. So it is bound for failure right away, just because she's got a certain reluctance to be a team player. She has no real interest in being a spy. She wants to be she wants very much to recreate her own empire in Starfleet's universe. And the part of the purpose of the book is to kind of show how she evolves on that particular matter. So it is a fun book. It brings back a couple of characters that we never really actually saw in the way that we see them in this book. We have one of the precursors to Dax, so one of the earlier Daxes.
Nice. All right.
So Emily Dax, the gymnast, is teamed up with this evil emperor for all of the book, and so is a character by the name of Finnegan. And of course, we never actually met the real Finnegan. We only met the nightmare Finnegan that was haunted James T. Kirk. But it was a lot of fun to bring him in and actually try to show what kind of a person he really was.
All right, cool.
And so that's the Star Trek book that's out in audiobook and ebook.
Okay,
the Star Wars book that is just out is The Empire Strikes Back from a Certain Point of View. This is the sequel to a book we did 3 years ago for A New Hope. And these are 40 stories by 40 authors taking 40 moments from The Empire Strikes Back and telling it from, again, the perspective of the character there. My story, which is called Lord Vader Will See You Now, it tells the story of what happens when Ray Sloan, who is the running character that I've done since the New Dawn novel several years ago, ends up being called on the carpet by Darth Vader. And since we already know that character survives because she has turned up in several other novels and also the new video game Squadrons, I got to tell the story of how she survived disappointing Darth Vader.
Wow.
And
Very cool.
and she does it in her characteristic fashion.
All right. Okay. So, all right. Let's hang on one second. Let me X out of this, and then we will. Okay, and we're back. So, here's what we're gonna do now. Thank you for that. We definitely look forward to those. So, I got something special for you. This is a section we do every single week where we're going to spin the wheel. Okay. All right. What I've got here is on the wheel are 7 categories. Wherever it lands is what you get. And the categories are Stranger in a Strange Land, Music Lover, Fear of Flying, Hello Earthlings, Beam Me Up Scotty, Never Tell Me the Odds, and Quantum Leap. All right. You ready?
Let's go.
All right.
Big money, no bankrupt.
That's it. No whammies.
Yeah, no whammies.
All right, and you got all right. Fear of Flying. Okay,
I
like this one. Okay, you ready? For some reason, it comes up a lot. All right, so you're in the Millennium Falcon. Han and Chewie are knocked out during battle, and you need to take over. Do you hop in the pilot's chair and let C-3PO and R2-D2 talk you through it, or do you abandon ship in the escape pods?
Well, I'm not even sure where exactly I would find the escape pods on the Millennium Falcon, so I would end up having to go back to my reference books to see where the things actually were. And maybe when I found the reference books, it might actually give me some idea of how to do something with it. But yeah, Star Wars is not a franchise where we worried a whole lot about how to actually pilot anything. That was one of the things that I loved when I did the Battlestar Galactica 40th anniversary graphic novel I did called Counter-Strike. It's called Counter-Strike. I did it a couple of years ago. What I loved about Galactica was the instructions on how to fly a Colonial Viper are right there on the throttle. The buttons are all labeled.
press here for thrust. All right, here we go. All right, so here's what we're gonna do now. So John, you and I are both in the writing business, so let's go to our advice column. What's the best and worst writing advice someone ever gave you, or advice you overheard?
Best and oh gosh, well, gosh, I will say that one of the things that I've always felt is you should always be writing for an audience. You should always be writing for an audience, and it doesn't matter whether you're writing about, as I said, lumber or writing for your high school newspaper, football game results, everything where you're actually communicating to somebody else, and having other people read what you're writing and giving you feedback, it's all valid. I never actually did fan fiction because in part, I was a junior capitalist back then, and I always assumed, even as a kid, that I needed to actually own something to be able to use it. But also, when I was drawing my comics, I couldn't draw very well, so I knew that if I drew Superman or Iron Man, nobody would be able to recognize him. But what I say about fan fiction is it does qualify under that heading of writing for an audience. You can still write it and get feedback and work on your craft. You just can't sell it, and that's the other. That's the other thing. Probably the best piece of advice I got about tie-in writing was when I started writing for Star Wars. I was told, when you define, you confine. Every time you write a story and you try to explain something, or you're actually shutting doors. Whenever you say something along the lines of, the words we never use the words always, we never use the words never. Nobody had ever been to this planet before. Well, you've just shut off anybody who's going to write in that shared universe before you. They can never go to that planet. You know, you want to tell stories that are about the characters and about what they're going through, and you know, actually, you know, using the stories to connect the dots, to tie together, you know, this previous story and that previous story and that previous story. That's really less important.
All right. All right. So we talked about your new books and where can folks get them? And then what's next for you?
Well, they can find Die Standing in audiobook, ebook, and trade paperback at all bookstores and online. There are links to these things on my website, farawaypress.com. Also, the John Jackson Miller page on Bookshop and on Amazon and various other places. The Empire Strikes Back is also audio and ebook and hardcover as well. And that should be out and available everywhere. People can find me on Twitter, JJM Faraway, on Facebook, John Jackson Miller, and then my comics history site is Comicron, COMICHRON. And if anybody's curious about, you know, what the best-selling comic book of all time was, you know, that's the kind of stuff that's over there.
All right, that's great. Thanks, John, for a great show, and thanks for everyone who's watching. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro, and since we've been talking about sci-fi and fantasy, I got a little something else to share with you guys. Let's see, what do we got here? All right, so Crossline. This is my space opera. It's about a modern day space pilot thrust into a parallel Earth, caught between rebellion, Armageddon, and a desperate fight to get home. And if sci-fi mystery is more your game, hot off the press is Crackle and Fire, featuring my hard-boiled intergalactic private eye, Angela Hardwick, who was hired to find a missing intern with stolen corporate files, but soon finds herself tackling with dueling gangsters, angry protesters, and a madman from Earth with galactic ambitions from his own. They're both available on Amazon and published by Crazy 8 Press. All right, well, I want to thank everyone for being here, for who's watching, and I want to thank John Jackson Miller for checking in. I'll be back next week for my last and final show of 2020, and then I'll be back again in January with a whole new season. Thanks everyone. Hope you had a good time. Take care.